Welcome to BARI Banter, where we talk everything bariatric surgery with the people that know it best, the patients. I'm Shannon, and I'm here with my co-hostess with the mostest,
Lita. So sit back, relax, and remember, sip, sip, sip.
I'm going to actually have to edit the start of that intro there because, you know, it says introducing my co-hostess with the mostest, Lita, but I don't have that co-host anymore. I've got a co-hostess named Bruce today.
Welcome to BARI Banter, up late.
Lita does sound like one of those ladies you pay $1 a minute for today.
So anybody listening today, you owe us $1 per minute for every time that I speak.
Oh, jeez. This is going to be a lot of fun. What's new for you this week, apart from losing your voice?
Yeah, lost my voice, had a COVID test, came back negative, so that's all exciting.
So what do you have? Just the flu?
Just the cold, I guess. You know, a common cold in the middle of winter.
That doesn't exist. What are you talking about? Exciting news. This weekend is the 1st of August, which means dry July's over. Mm-hmm. I know. I've done a whole month.
Sunday, Shannon's going to go out and get written off.
Yeah, no. Well,
Going to the brewery.
I got that race the Roo race, so I'll do that first.
And then you'll have a beer afterwards.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I've got a baby shower, so I will not be getting on it.
Milk's all round. So, yeah, let's introduce our guest. We'll get stuck into it today. This is episode 50, by the way. This is episode 50.
So episode 52, actually, we were thinking about going live. So we'll let everybody know. So then in about 2 weeks' time, we'll put up some question boxes and see if we can get some people asking some questions beforehand, but also we'll get on live on Instagram, and Shannon's trying so hard not to laugh at me right now. And we'll answer some rapid fire questions.
Rapid fire questions. Yeah, that's gonna be a technical nightmare. Not gonna lie, doing the live and trying to do the podcast, but we'll work it out because I think it'll be really cool to sit down and have people live asking questions on BARI Banter, which then will be released because we'll probably do it like the Tuesday before, and then the next Tuesday release it as episode 52 or something. Like
I guess we haven't quite figured out the logistics of it yet.
We just roll.
We'll
with
let
it.
you know.
Roll with it.
Talking about rolling with it, our guest tonight actually reached out to us because she really wanted to come on and tell her story. She was laughing at me too. Everybody's laughing at me. She was sleeved back in April of 2018 with a starting weight of 120 kilos. She was pretty much the same as me, but 3 years after regaining to a weight of 105 kilos, she went back under the knife to gastric bypass. Can you take over, Shan?
I'm going to have to get it up. I really should have thought about this. 3 years on, she's had the gastric bypass after, having some weight regain. Here to talk to us about the roller coaster of lessons she's experienced is Ali, also known on Instagram as Ali_version 2.0. Can I just start by saying I love that handle, 2.0. Like, it's quite cool.
Like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
she did it again.
Oh, she did it again. So is that a new handle, or is that one that you had since the sleeve?
No, I decided to do a new handle. My first handle, people might have known me as with my heart on my sleeve. And then I changed. So I was like, it's a little bit of a new version. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, because I thought you might have had that before, the sleeve, and I was like, wow, like talk about like works well for all occasions, that one. But first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming on, because I'm excited to have this chat with you, because as I was kind of just saying pre-podcast, it is a conversation I think we definitely need to have within the weight loss community. So I guess we can start off with, so when you went through the sleeve to bypass, did you do this just because of regain, or did you do it because of other complications?
Okay, so and it's a good question to start with, because it's a question that I often get asked in my DMs. I think there's definitely a stigma about going under the knife again. It's sort of like, one, we know it costs a lot of money. Two, it's major surgery. But no, I didn't have any other severe complications. I had reflux, but nothing serious that I couldn't function or that I was vomiting all the time or anything like that. I knew what the trigger foods were with reflux, but it really was purely the regain. And I'm sure we'll explore that in this podcast a little bit more of how that happened.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I had to learn a lot about before I made the decision to go with.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So it's something you would take. You wouldn't take it light. Making that decision to have it. So obviously you went through the processes of roller coaster of emotions and lessons and different things to kind of understand that that's the avenue you needed to go down. Because you have done the sleeve and bypass, how have you found, them compared to each other? Like, now that you've had 6 months worth of bypass, how are you finding the sleeve and bypass differences?
Yeah. So, first of all, the sleeve was a very different surgery to the bypass in terms of my recovery initially. I can remember waking up from that surgery and, vomiting and crying and, it was just awful. I honestly started to mourn the loss of being able to drink water after that surgery. Because I was like, am I really going to have to be able to just have these tiny sips all the time? It was a little bit scary, to be honest. Those initial parts, I knew, of course, you were going to get restriction. Obviously, in that initial stage, there was a lot of swelling from the surgery that caused that really tight restriction. But then after the bypass, I didn't have that. In fact, I could take, it sounds crazy, but I could have gulps of water after the bypass.
Wow.
And I feel like I could easily drink, let's say I could drink 300 mils of water in one go now.
Wow.
Whereas I went from, a 10 mil to 20 mils to this. So, and it's all because I think that the pouch is different compared to the vertical sleeve, where it ends out a lot faster. So there's more room in there.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a common thing that bypass people don't have that restriction water. Because I guess a lot of sleeve people that we talk to do have that issue with being able to drink water. But
as Ali just said, because with the vertical sleeve, it kind of goes down and sits in the bottom of your belly. With the bypass, I guess it kind of trickles through a lot quicker. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I've never asked that question to someone who's had the bypass to know whether it was everyone that had bariatric.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I asked my surgeon about it because I, of course, was concerned. I'm thinking, shouldn't I have this restriction after the surgery? Something's gone wrong. Maybe he didn't really operate.
He forgot to do it. Damn it.
Yeah, maybe it was just placebo. And I was lucky. He actually showed me some footage of the surgery that he decided to put a little YouTube clip together of it, which was pretty cool. But he said that he actually, not long after me, did another revision surgery on another patient that went from sleeve to bypass, and they experienced the same sort of things in regards to the different level of restriction and things like that. So, but I think this has actually worked out better for me. That it sounds strange, but that I can eat more and drink more than I could the last time around. And I'll probably go into a little bit about that because I worked out with the sleeve all the foods I could eat a lot of, because we know that with certain foods you can't eat a lot when you have a sleeve because of the restriction.
Yeah.
And that's where I really ran into a lot of issues with the sleeve and with regain.
You essentially figured out how to bypass your sleeve with the foods that you were eating. Yeah.
And you're saying with the bypass, you're not feeling the restriction with those foods as much?
Yeah, so I'm actually able to get a more satisfied proper meal in. When I say a proper meal, I'm still making sure I'm not eating more than half the cup. But I can go, I've actually been able to eat that without feeling like I'm going to vomit it back up and go, I'm okay with that. I'm satisfied with what I've eaten.
Oh, wow.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas before, I think with the sleeve, I was like, oh, my gosh, I can have 2 mouthfuls, 3 mouthfuls. This is really shit. I'm still hungry. I haven't been able to, feed that feeling that I needed. So I'd go for lighter type foods to go, well, I'm not going to have a proper meal. I need to eat. That kind of thing.
So you kind of eat a lot more sliders so that in your mind you're thinking that you're eating more than what you actually were. Well, you were eating more essentially, but because I was just thinking about it then because we just had some food before we jumped on here with you. And I've only sort of served us half dinner, but I'm quite full from that. And I got some pita pockets and I made essentially tacos out of pita pockets. And I had half of one pita pocket and Shan had one full pita pocket. And that was enough for me. Maybe in an hour or two I might have another half. But it's funny how I think to myself, I don't really have much of a restriction anymore. But I ate half a pita pocket and I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
You kind of forget as well where your restrictions at compared to what we used to be able to eat as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but so with the bypass, it mainly relies on malnutrition, doesn't it? Because obviously you bypass a certain part of the small intestine where a lot of the nutrition and stuff's taken out of the food, i.e. that a lot of the fat and different things, and that's one of the main components to the bypass, where the sleeve is mainly a restriction based. I could be completely wrong, but I do know.
No, that's 100% correct.
Yeah.
So, you know, with the bypass, you know, of course, I have to really make sure I'm having the vitamins all the time. Make sure that I'm not at risk of malnutrition and things like that. But I'm finding, and as well as with the bypass, and another reason why I knew this was a good option for me to go down is, you know, there is the side effect of dumping if you eat the wrong food.
Oh, yeah. In
terms of when I say wrong, high fat, high sugar foods. I've been really fortunate. I haven't had any dumping, but it's because I don't want to have dumping. Mindset of going, I do not want that to happen. I am not eating high fat foods or high sugar foods. Or, do you know what I mean? Like that's sort of a big change to me that the bypass has brought on.
Yeah. Do you think that's also due to you going through the process of the sleeve? It's kind of giving you a little bit more of a, hey, this tool doesn't want me to do certain things, so I'm actually going to play by the tool's rules this time around?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And you know, in saying that as well, I did a lot of work with a psychologist last year. And it's something I didn't do before the sleeve surgery. And I look back at things now, and Instagram's great for this, you know, when you go through your archive stories. Mm-hmm. And before I went through the revision surgery, I actually watched back my stories from the very beginning. And there's a story that I had on there where I think it might have been my 3-month post-op appointment. And I said to the dietitian, I just don't feel like eating anymore. Like I don't have the motivation to cook meals. But, you know, it was all just, and at that point, I should have been seeing a psychologist when I look back at that. Like there's something wrong there where instead of actually addressing the issue of why didn't I feel like cooking meals, it was because like I couldn't really eat them, you know. So then I'd go, well, I'm just going to snack instead. Yeah. You know? And while that first year, I did lose almost 40 kilos that first year, but it was because of, you know, the tool itself. And we know that doesn't last. I didn't change the habits that I needed to in that time.
So you're saying,
and I also did the full,
Yeah, so you're just saying like rather than focusing on, it was teaching you bad habits with food, like it was teaching you more to snack than it was teaching you to look at smaller meals.
And nutritious foods.
And nutritious foods, you were just kind of like using the tool for what it was. Like it was giving you food restrictions, so you were just snacking. But then you're 100% right. That teaches you bad habits of like, you know, you wouldn't do that without the sleeve, but it's like it's teaching you to snack all the time. So I do really get that.
So you, in the first year, you lost 40 kilos and then you ended up regaining what, about 20, was it?
Yeah. So I think I'm someone who sets high expectations for myself, and I'm my own worst critic. And I think everyone has that ideal of what they should get to in that first 12 months and how much weight they should lose, or, you know, and it's hard not to compare. Totally. I didn't reach what I wanted to in that 12 months, and I didn't even go to my 12-month follow-up appointment because I feared the disappointment or admitting to that disappointment. And when I look back, I'm like, how stupid is that? Like, how can you be disappointed with, you know, losing almost 40 kilos? There's nothing to be ashamed about that. Like, but I didn't go to the 12-month follow-up appointment, and I didn't go to any after that. And I just kind of stuck my head in the sand a little bit. And, you know, it wasn't that I regained all that weight straight away. Like that second year, you know, it was only very slowly coming back on. And it wasn't until, say, September of that year, I was like, I've got to do something about this. You know, I don't want to be like this. Like, and I got a fitness passport for the gym. I was like, I'm going to go see a PT, and I was paying for that 2 or 3 mornings a week. Did that up until Christmas. And I've got a photo on my Instagram of where I was in a change room trying on some swimmers. And I was like, no, I'm not getting these. I look terrible. Just my own mindset. And when I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, you should have just got the swimmers. Like, you know,
was that a bit of body dysmorphia? Was it body dysmorphia?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then it was a slippery spiral into just denial about it, I suppose. And you know, last year, that's when I gained a significant amount of weight. And I know it was COVID and things like that. I'm not blaming COVID because my problem started long before COVID. But, you know, I'm not really a big drinker, and I started drinking all the time. And drinking, snacking, and I was not exercising at all. At all. Like, so of course you're going to regain weight. Like,
so
you know,
just, if you
calories in versus calories out.
Well, that reminds me of a conversation I had today, and I want to ask you a question. So, like, if you compared who you were prior to surgery to who you were 3 years out, what had really changed for you in that 3 years, like as a person?
Okay, as a person, so the thing that changed when a lot changed over that time, I've got to say, but in terms of when I really started putting the weight back on, that part that changed was I stopped communicating about any issues. I kind of held everything in trying to please everybody else. I'd had a promotion at work that, you know, was in a high management position, and I really just focused my time on supporting everyone else, supporting my family, and really not caring about me, and not even and it got to a point where I had a breakdown on the lounge. I remember we were supposed to go out one night, and I was like, I just didn't even know how to get off the lounge. I was stressed about how much cleaning needed to be done around the house. I didn't even know how to get started getting ready. And that was the first time my husband saw me, and even my kids saw me. I was like a mess. I was like, something's got to change here. This is not okay. And that's when I started seeing the psychologist.
So do you feel like, because you obviously you're realizing that the weight was coming back on, and in your eyes you were like, oh my God, this isn't working. So you were putting a lot of internal stress on yourself, which was, you know, obviously you weren't putting it out there and like getting it out. So you were just bottling it up, and it was building and building. And then obviously it was just, you know, you just became like a lesser version of yourself really because of it.
Yeah. Well, I stopped even looking in the mirror. I stopped, you know, it's funny, like, you know, my daughter, and she still says this to me at times, like, you know, we'll be walkable, not now that it's lockdown, but, you know, we'll be at the shop, and she'll be like, oh, Mum, that was such and such. And I wouldn't have even known that we were coming near them or just about to pass them, because my eyes aren't looking at other people, like not looking to make eye contact. It's sort of like not even wanting to make eye contact with myself. It was a real, like, put your head in the sand kind of thing. And that, I think, has changed a lot for me now, is that I try and tell myself, it's the way I talk to myself had to change. That's the biggest change that happened. You know, I thought the initial surgery was going to change how I thought about myself, and it didn't. It didn't change how I thought about myself. It wasn't until I really did the work, and I thought I was a self-sabotager, and I felt like, you know, why is it that I just can't do this? What's wrong with me? Because I've yo-yoed my whole life. You know, done every diet. Why can't I make this stick? You know, I can be successful in my career. I can be a good mum, but why can't I do this for me? That was what it got to. And I was like, you know, really had to do that. I was my own worst critic. You know, I had all these high expectations for myself. No one else put them on me. It was just me.
Yeah. So you're almost like sitting there and being like, I have an issue, but then you're not wanting to go, well, what is that issue? And I think that's what unlocked for you as soon as you said, hey, I have these issues and I want to sit down with somebody and I want to work them out. That's where the real progress started coming through for you by the sounds of it, because you weren't so much sitting there just being, I have an issue. You actually went, I have an issue and I want to fix the issue.
And I want to do something about it this time.
So it's
and I realized that, you know, starting from like a young age, like I was always that people pleaser, you know, wanted to make everyone else happy around me, and it didn't matter. And, you know, people would never sort of know that I was unhappy, because it would make me happy to make other people happy. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I haven't gone through my life being miserable. I like seeing other people happy, but I never really thought about what made me happy. You know? And I think that was the question that the psychologist asked me. She's like, what makes you happy? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what makes me happy. Like, I really had to reflect on that. I'm like, I don't know.
Were you an overweight younger person as well? Because the reason why I asked that is because I know that when I was growing up and I was overweight, that was my thing. Like I just wanted everybody else in the room to be having a good time, to make sure that they were all happy, and like kind of like took the emphasis off who I was as a person, because everybody could see my personality, so to speak, rather than my physical being. So like that's how I used to compensate the way that I felt, was like I knew that I was the biggest person in the room, but as long as I wasn't like putting the attention on me physically, like as long as I was making sure that everybody else was having a really great time in the room, then I felt like people weren't watching me as a person,
And,
if that makes sense.
Judging you because they're too busy having a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I look back at it now, and I always felt like I was, I've got two sisters. I was always the biggest sister out of them, but I was actually the sporty one in my family. I played competitive netball at rep level. I played tennis. I was the swimmer, but I always saw myself as this really big person. And the same with my friends. My friends were just really skinny when I look back at it now. I'm like, they were ultra skinny. I wasn't overweight. I probably would have been in a BMI stage. But, I was doing Duke of Edinburgh Award. Like I was the sporty one, but I was always the bigger one as well. So and there was a time, and it still goes through my mind, every morning I walk now, and it still plays a part in my mind, where I have a memory from, my early teen years, where I was walking home from, I don't know if it was the bus stop or the local shops, and I was walking with my younger sister, and we're walking home. I can remember the exact spot that I was at, and these guys called out of their car, "You're fat." And it just it broke me. I remember walking home the rest of the way, trying not to let my little sister, who's 5 years younger than me, know that it had upset me. And I just went to my room and cried and cried and cried. And it still hits me to that time that, what are people thinking about me? I'm the fat one. And I wasn't fat when I look back at these photos. Like it's just, but then, I stopped playing sport after that too, because I just became so self-conscious of who I was.
Yeah, it hit like a nerve on you, and that was like a soft spot. Oh, that broke my heart.
Yeah, well, Shannon knows my similar, and I've said it on here before. I had it in like grade 6 or 7. I had my first boyfriend at school or whatever, and his friends came over to sing me a song that apparently he had written, and the end of the song ended up in, he thinks that you're pretty ugly, and then they walked away, and they're like, "You're dumped," and like that. Shannon says it to me all the time. "Oh, you're really pretty," and he can kind of see me like
for the pretty ugly. I'm like, no, you're just pretty.
I cringe now. I can't. I was 13 years old, and it stuck with me.
Oh yeah. It's certain little things like that.
I was probably a similar age.
Yeah. That's something like I said. Like, there's a lot of, you can't just ever look at a bigger person and just say you're big because you like food. Like, there's usually underlying things that make you want that food, like as a control mechanism. Because like, you talk to any bigger person, we all have those stories. We all have those times where we felt lesser of a person or insecure, and then we used food as our vice. I'm sure if you talk to a drug addict, they'd probably say they had certain things in their life as well where they related back to that vice of drugs to get them through certain situations because of past experiences and stuff like that. So it's as we always say, it's the worst addiction you can have is food, but it's an addiction for a reason. Yeah. So throughout
I 100% agree.
Yeah. Throughout your sleep,
and it's hard because it's everywhere. Food's everywhere. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, it is. It's the toughest addiction because you have to have it. It's the only drug you have to have. So it makes it really difficult. In your sleep, so if you could sit here now, can you pinpoint certain things that were your undoing? Like, if you could give us 3 dot points that you look back on now throughout the sleeve that led you back to with the regain and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so the first dot point would be I got a promotion at my work almost 1 year after my sleeve. So, I had a little bit less than 1 year. I wanted to do so well to prove myself in that promotion position that was my sole focus, was work.
Okay.
I'd work at an evening. I, prioritized work over everything. It was like I needed to prove myself there. And that's when I really stopped exercising because I was just so exhausted all the time from working. The second thing would be relationships. So, I've been married, or I've been with my husband since I was 17.
Oh, wow.
Just before I turned 18. But we did we did separate for a little while, 6 months before I had my first sleeve surgery, and we got back together in that year after surgery. So maybe that as well, because we still had things we had to work on. And while we had seen a counsellor, during that beginning part of the separation, we kind of didn't really do anything. We were back in that honeymoon kind of period when we got back together, but there were still issues there. And it wasn't until earlier this year, we've done a marriage course and everything. Like, we've really had to address some of what the issues were. So that to me was a real turning point as well in flipping things around. I had to address the issues. I couldn't just keep burying my head about it. So that would have been another dot point where I was just like feeling a bit helpless. So I just throw myself more into work.
Yeah.
Like, it was an easy solution to a lot of things. I've actually changed jobs now.
Oh,
I was
really?
like, this is not healthy for me. Yeah. I was like, it's not healthy. I needed more of a work-life balance. I needed a job where I could have a work-life balance. And it's working out really well.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. And of course, things with my husband are a lot better now as well. That, all relationships continue to need work. But, we haven't buried our heads in the sand about it.
Well, it sounds like with your marriage, it is a lot like kind of your food relation. You just said we need to work on it. And I think it's a key component to anything in life. Like, if you I always say my thing is lose the ego. Like, when you come into this process, lose the ego, understand you got big for a reason. It's not because you're smart when it comes to food. It's not because you have the best relationships to food. Like, being a bigger guy, my ego was massive prior to surgery. It's still pretty big, but I've learned to say, I don't know the answer. I don't know. It's a very powerful statement sometimes to just say you don't know and then ask the question to someone who may know, because then you get educated on it. Because I always say that education is the key to success in this process, because the fact is we don't know nutrition. No. We don't know food. Like, I even had the conversation the other day with Roger from BM Multi. He called me up and we were talking about he was putting all the facts out there about why people should have multis and da-da-da-da-da. And I had literally said to him, mate, you lost me in the first sentence. And I said, I think that's where the gap needs to be filled, because I think multis are very important. But people within the bariatric community don't understand it, because you get all this mumbo jumbo scientific
facts,
B12, blah, 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 blah. And someone from my background, and this is what I said to him, I'm lost. I'm so lost. You got to understand, I'm only just getting to a point where I understand what B12 is and what it does to the body. And now you throw in all this other stuff and how this one's better and da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, this is where people are going wrong. We need to simplify it. Put it in, and I literally said to him, put it in a cartoon. Make a cartoon and tell me in a simplistic version why bariatric patients need to have their multivitamins. What's the pros? What's the cons? Simplify the hell out of it.
I was about to say, I remember that time that you figured out what, Amy taught us what BCAAs were.
Yeah.
And she was kind of like, well, the protein comes down and it gets on the little vessel and it
was
goes
so
down the
simple.
highway and blah, blah, blah. And it was just kind of because you could picture food goes in your mouth, and they turn into these little characters that then get in separate cars, and then one goes through the bloodstream, which is the highway, and the other one goes through. And then at the end of our walk, Shannon was like, oh, wow, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, but it was also she started here and then she just kept going to other things. I said, no, for this whole walk, I just want to understand BCAAs. I don't want to understand anything else. I just want to understand how they work in the body. Because BCAAs, I didn't realize what they actually stood for. And it's amino acids, was it? Something.
Some
but
sort of chain
I've always
amino
seen
acid.
these 4 letters, these 4 letters? Yeah, letters, and just seen them as the component. I didn't understand what they were. And I think that is where we come unravel, because everyone expects, you've had bariatric surgery, you should know all this. It's no, we're kindergartens. We've always just been whatever's at hand.
Mate, you took my stomach out. You didn't operate on my brain.
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes the case. And then we have people and he was saying, you should really bring experts on. I said, honestly, BARI Banter isn't about that, because I'm not an expert. And honestly, there's other podcasts out there that deal with experts, and that's great. But I don't want to be a bariatric patient trying to show other bariatric patients what they shouldn't be doing. I'm just bringing other bariatric patients on to kind of tell their story, so it gives people kind of an idea of what to expect. Like, we're not experts. We shouldn't be telling each other what to do. But yeah, long story short, 100% education is key, whether it's in your relationship. Oh, I just went on a bit of a tangent, but like, you know, in a relationship, in work, whatever it is, you've got to just be able to say, I don't know. Let me learn.
Let me learn it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you like, you 6 months. So I want to ask you, 6 months out, because you're 6 months out now from having the gastric bypass, 6 months out from the sleeve, how is it, like, how have you done it differently? So like, you know, 6 months out from gastric sleeve, 6 months out from bypass, what are you doing differently this time?
So the first thing that I'm doing differently is I'm addressing what's going on in my head each day. So first of all, it's the self-talk. So, you know, I started listening to an audiobook called Atomic Habits, which I think I've heard you talk about before, Shan.
I love that book. I love it. I've listened to it like 4 times. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just started trying to stack habits and going, okay, so this is my time where I've got to set. I'm a routine-based person, so I've got to set these healthy habits into my routine. So one of the ways to help support me do that was I actually got a weight loss coach. As someone who's been through a weight loss journey themselves, and it's someone who each day I report into just to say, you know, I sort of report in how, like, what my step count was, like what my mind frame is, like how much sleep I got, like all those kind of things that are just all to do with your healthy habits. If I'm having a shitty day or whatever, I'll say, like, you know, I kind of had a bit of a blowout yesterday or whatever, like, you know, but I know this is what's going on, and just sort of, you know, admitting to those things or putting it out there just really helps. And the fact that it's someone else that's been through, you know, weight battles and things like that is really helpful because they can relate.
So it's almost acting as like your inner voice. Like, you know, where you would usually talk in your head, you're verbalizing it to someone else.
Because it also keeps you accountable a little bit as well, because you've got to check in with this person at the end of every day and just have a chat about it. So
I like that. That's
so
cool.
Accountability definitely helps. And then the things like with the Atomic Habits, so like the first thing I did was, you know, I wanted to make sure I started my day right with getting out, exercising, doing something that I like, which is walking. And on those days that are really tough, or like, you know, you have days where you're tired or whatever, I just sort of start to just think of the tiny little things, like just get 2 feet out of bed. That's the first step. That's all you've got to think about right now. And then the rest starts to follow, you know, and it just becomes routine. And I go the same way because then I don't even need to think about it. It just becomes a habit. So that's something that's really different. I find when I start my day right like that, then I'm having a healthy breakfast. You know, I'm not skipping the meals that I need to have to keep, you know, my nutrition. So I don't want to have malnutrition or anything like that. Exactly. I'm making sure I'm hitting those protein goals. I've got really fine hair as it is. I need to make sure I don't lose
Keep it all, yeah. Yeah.
The other thing I do is I take my vitamins every day.
Good girl.
Still don't know, like you said earlier, all the reasons why I need to take those vitamins, but I just know they're really important.
I've been told to do it, so I do it.
I will do it. I will be a good bariatric patient and I'll take those BN multis.
I said the other day, taking your multis is like paying your car insurance. It's like,
That's
once
right.
you need it.
It's non-negotiable.
Yeah, it's like when you realize, oh, I really should be taking my multivitamins, it's usually too late. You've got malnutrition, you're losing memory, you're losing hair. Like, you don't want to see those side effects. Just
take them.
Pay your insurance, get your multis.
That's right. And it wasn't until like last year that, you know, I decided to take my head out of the sand and address what was going on, that I had the blood test done. And I was like, my doctor was like, you've got the trifecta. You have like really low iron, low B12, low vitamin D, like at critical levels. And I was like,
no wonder I'm an insomniac and feel like I can't walk
that's
around.
not something I want to win at.
Wow.
So,
you know, working really hard on all of these things. So, you know, those sort of things have changed. But, you know, like I am someone who I weigh in every day.
Yep.
I've learned a lot about weight in terms of I could weigh in 5 times a day. I know that scale will change through the day. I understand that weight can be changed with lots of different things. But it's just something that keeps me accountable to go, this is what could have affected that, because as I said, I very easily become an ostrich and choose not to acknowledge things. So it's important for me to keep on top of that. But it's a story I tell myself before I get on that scale. So I will now look at myself in the mirror and go, are you happy? Like, before you step on that scale, like, are you happy with, how you've been going? Are you happy with this, your health and things like that? And every day my answer has been, yeah, I am.
Oh my God,
I really am. I'm so much happier now. And so when I jump on those scales, it's just as a little tracker. It's not going to determine how I feel about myself. And that's a really powerful shift that I've had this time round that I didn't have before. I would let those scales determine if I was feeling like success or a failure.
Wow,
now,
really great
I know my weight goes up and down, with little things. So many things affect your weight. But it's the story I'm going to tell myself about, it's life, sometimes you might have had a lot more to drink the day before or whatever. Like, it's, just because that number goes up a little bit does not mean that you're a failure. And often I was someone who, when I feel like I'm a failure, I'll just punish myself with, comfort food and things like that, trying to make myself feel better. But we know it doesn't make myself feel better.
No. Oh, I love that though. I love that positive affirmation side of things, because it's very coming from our background, being able to sit there and be like, I'm worthy, I'm awesome, I'm enjoying life. This number isn't going to define me is a very powerful position to put yourself in, because I think sometimes that weight, that little number on that little piece of glass or whatever it is, does define us and does make us feel a certain feeling. So I love that.
And I think as well, some people shouldn't weigh every day, because if they're mentally, they're not able to sort of accept the way that you do it, then that's fine. Like, I've gotten to the point now that I haven't weighed myself in probably about 3 months, and I feel like I'm almost scared to get back on the scales, because I know it's not going to affect me either way, but I can guarantee that if I'm at a number that I know roughly where I'm sitting. But if I get on the scales and I'm not where I think I'm roughly sitting, then I probably will have that sort of self-doubt and lack of self-worth and all that sort of thing, even though I know that I'm happy where I'm at. I know that I'm healthy. I know that I'm living my day-to-day life. But if I sort of get back on the scales and I'm up more than what I thought I would, then I will not spiral, but I will kind of be like, oh shit, well, that's not ideal. So I've gotten to the point now that I haven't gotten on the scales in so long, out of almost, not out of fear, but there's always that looming feeling of, oh, I don't really want to get back on them again.
Yeah, but I feel like that's almost like catch
the opposite.
Too,
it is.
Because that's almost like putting your head in the sand, like what she's talking about.
I used to weigh myself once a week and it was fine. And then when I my weight just stabilized for a good year, I was like, oh, well, there's no need to me get back on them again. And then probably about 6 months ago, I got on them and I was like, oh, okay, it started going up. And I kind of got on them once a week again, and it kept on going up, and then it would go down and go up. And I was like, okay, this is my new normal. That's fine. And now I'm just like, I don't want to get on them just in case my new normal's gotten higher again. It's a bit weird.
But I think that's kind of what, what she's saying is you are pretty much burying your head in the sand.
100% I am.
Yeah, so maybe you need to just...
I'm waiting until the end of July because I haven't drunk any alcohol. So if those numbers are damn up and I haven't been drinking alcohol, that's it. I'm going back to full-time alcoholism.
I want that dehydration. So continue if you have any more, because we interrupted you a little bit there, but you were on a roll and you had some really valid, good points there. Was there anything else that you wanted to add into that?
That is the main change. I had to change my head, the way I thought about things and the way I think about things each day. So that to me was the biggest change. The stacking the habits and reading or listening to the audiobook of Atomic Habits was a big one. But also just being accountable to myself is important to me. I suppose it's like someone who is really bad with money and they just choose not to look at their account, to see that their funds are dwindling or whatever. I'll just pretend it's not happening, but the spending keeps happening. For me, I need to keep an eye on those scales. I know from my track record, and it's funny, I've had a Fitbit for almost 7 years. So I've got the tracker of where I haven't tracked my weight every day in that whole time. but I can see like the peaks and the troughs. It's quite scary. And when it's gone to the peaks, like the really high peaks multiple times, I have not been stepping on those scales. I have like chosen to just not be aware of it until it's gone to that point where it's like, oh crap, like none of my clothes.
It's one of those, like, I didn't weigh myself for freaking months. And then I got on there the other day and I was like, okay, so like I was like, my lowest was down towards 80 and I'm up like about 8 kilos from that. But it's also like I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, I'm up about 8 kilos from my lowest, but I also don't ride 30 kilometers a day anymore. So, you know, I got on there and I was like, okay, cool. So like for the last year, I've been at pretty much the same weight, 8 kilos up from where I am. But you're right. We shouldn't fear the scales, because I think fearing the scales is almost like telling yourself that I probably am not going to like what's going to be on there. And it's kind of, I guess, reinforcing what you probably already know.
Pulling a blanket over your eyes, being like,
because you probably already know you haven't made the right decisions and you don't want to know. You're like, oh, the pants feel tighter. So I guess that's kind of my version of the scales. But so, yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I think that's a really key message. Like, you need to just be like, I'm gaining weight.
What do I do about it?
What am I doing and what can I do about it? And like you just said, talk to a psychologist, talk to a dietitian. Like, there's people out there that get paid good money for a reason, and it's because they know their shit. they know what to tell you. They know they've seen other people go through it. So, yeah, I think that's really valid.
Yeah, very true.
Your goals prior to the gastric sleeve, like we're talking like 3 years ago, are they still the same goals now?
Yes and no. So I always just thought with my goals that I just wanted to be skinny like my friends, you know, like I just didn't want to be the one that was the bigger person or, you know, things like that. So I always, like, I suppose had a really strong weight goal in my mind. And while I do have a weight goal, it's not the be all and end all goal. The thing that I realized the most, and I took for granted in that first year, like I started to do a lot of firsts in that first year in terms of, you know, wearing swimmers when it was hot instead of covering up, you know, I'd go swimming. Or, you know, I started playing netball again when I hadn't played for, you know, over 10 years. Like things like that, they were always goals for me, not to be on the sideline with things anymore, like to participate in life, like was a big goal. And so that still is a goal for me. You know, getting a bike, like a mountain bike was like, you know, I just got that at the end of last year. End of last year. I can't remember. It took ages to order in because of COVID. Everyone was getting bikes.
Because of COVID.
So it took a while. But, you know, like things like that. Like I really wanted to go riding with the kids and my husband. They all loved it. And I was like, why am I not doing this? You know, so those goals have continued to be the same. But I just want to have, the main goal is to really have a healthy relationship with food. Like that is probably the biggest change this time round that I really thought about compared to the first time round. I kind of thought that the sleeve would do that change for me, but it didn't, because the relationship we have with food, we know is a lot of mental, you know, reasons why we eat.
That's it.
I can tell you, like, you know, it's not because I was hungry or like, you know, that I was fading away that I needed to eat. It was more emotional reasons why I needed to eat, or, you know, just that I liked food. So I think as well, I don't know if I was really honest with myself the first time round in terms of, like, I remember sitting down with my surgeon. My mum came with me to the appointment. She was like, you know, when we were deciding what type of surgery to have, and I was like, you know, I really do enjoy food. I have big portions of food and wouldn't really feel full. But I don't think I was really honest with myself in sort of really admitting to that I used food emotionally a lot.
As a vice, like to cope with certain situations.
As a vice.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until, you know, after going through the regain after surgery that, you know, I didn't really even consider would happen, to be honest, because no one talks about it after surgery. Like, as I said to you in my stories this morning, people just drop off the
Yeah.
community and you don't hear from them. And, you know, you assume that they're going all right. But, you know, they might be. Like, the chances are, like, I dropped off the community for a year.
Yeah.
You know,
that's the dangerous part about the weight loss community too on Instagram, because like people 1 year out, 2 years out, like they look at people 3 years out, 4 years out and kind of go, oh, I'm going to model my process on their process. But it's also like I've seen people who, you know, the same time out as me disappear because, you know, they didn't make the right decisions and then they started putting the weight back on and then they just disappear off Instagram. But you've also got to understand that like behind that person that was 2 years out, 3 years out was probably people who were modeling themselves off that person. You know what I mean? So that's the dangerous thing with Instagram, I find, definitely in the weight loss community, because you don't know if the person you're looking at is doing things the way that would work for them and work for you. So I think, and that's what I always say, like as much as you got to do it your way, because no one knows the right way for you. So, you know, and I talk about it all the time because like you see people out there now who are 2 years out, 3 years out, and you'll kind of look at it going, questionable habits that you have, and glorifying certain habits. And you kind of go, oh, geez, like you almost want to be able to fast forward that person to see how they go with it, because they could be doing it right and they could be really successful at it. But it's also like they're also kind of teaching other people those habits. You know what I mean? So
yeah, they might not be able to get on top of them like they have.
You know, that's so true. And like, you know, my lowest weight that I have ever been, right? You know, this was obviously prior to kids. I was at uni. I worked at a gym. I was a receptionist at a gym. I was doing like 2 spin classes a day. And I weighed the lowest I ever had, but I literally ate like 1 piece of fish a day. Like it wasn't health. Like that is not health. No. Like, but I looked like everyone would comment, you look so great, you know, but I was not healthy at all.
Yeah.
Like I'm malnourished and dehydrated.
Yeah. And you know what? Like I'd go out and drink at night and live on a piece of fish for the day. Like that's not healthy at all. No. Yet that's what it took for me to be at that. Now I feel like I've got that balance right, you know, eating nutritious meals. I'm concentrating on, you know, making sure I'm getting all those vitamins and things. And I'm actually setting habits that I can try and keep for life, you know. With the gym, like I think I said to you guys, like I've got a goal to run. I would like to be able to run. But at the same time, I want to have something that I can continue, that I don't go, oh my gosh, I've done an injury that I can't continue this. Like walking, everyone can walk. Like it's such great exercise. And, you know, I always like say, like it's like my daily serotonin. That's what I'm getting my feel good hormone from now, not from the food. Like, and I really enjoy it. It's not a chore to get out of bed to go and do it.
And it's very true. Like even this morning, like I haven't been doing much exercise in the morning because I've been working very big days. So I've been doing my exercise mostly at nights. But then this morning I got up earlier and I ran to a quote and I was like, I just felt better today. So for me in my head, I think starting the day with, even if it's like it's a walk or it's
we used to walk the dogs along the beach every morning.
Like it's amazing what that little physical exercise in the morning can produce for you throughout the day. It's kind of like how they always say you should always make your bed in the morning because it's like you've accomplished something. I think that's Atomic Habits actually. I can't remember where I read that in, but it was like you should make your bed because you accomplished something before you even leave the house. So you kind of, you know, I think it's the same kind of thing. So 100% I agree with that because it's like, I feel it today. I just feel more focused and more like there as I stutter.
As you don't know what you're saying.
Sentence, but I'm never really there. But like for me, I'm quite there.
So was a question for you, were you ashamed about your regain? Like, because as we were saying, there's not very many people who talk about it in the community. They all just sort of drop off the face of the earth. How was that to actually sort of admit to yourself and also admit to, you know, your psychologist and I guess essentially your bariatric surgeon as well, that you're like, hey, I need help because clearly I've regained. Like, how was that for you?
Yeah. That, to me, was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do, was to call up my surgeon and say, you haven't heard from me for, you know, over 2 years. Here's why. I kind of felt like I was like the naughty child or something. Like, well, I didn't like. I mean, so silly to think of it like that, but I was so scared of the judgment that I'd failed this, and my sister, you have failed. Like, in fact, you calling up is massive to show that you haven't failed.
Yeah.
You know, you've had this big hiccup, and it wasn't. Please don't think that the surgeon was like, oh, you need to go in for a revision. It was like, we need to get you into psychologist. Like, we need to get you, like, you know, and it was like all these people were there to support and help me and didn't make me feel ashamed. And that's when I jumped back into this community. I was like, I've got to admit, this is where I'm at, you know, here's an update.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm doing about it, you know?
Yeah. So it
took.
Yeah, you're right. Keep going.
Yeah. And I did feel like it was more about how I felt and the judgment that I was putting on myself than anyone else's judgment on me.
It always
you
is.
know, no one else was judging me. It was all myself.
Yeah.
So, and you know, as I said when I reached out to you guys to say, oh, you know, I want to talk about the regain and things like that and revision surgery, there is that little inkling where I'm thinking, oh, am I going to get DMs of like when people see this podcast and go, you know, you're failed. There's always some trolls out there, you know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know what? I've owned it. I have done something about it. I haven't just gone and had revision surgery. I've changed so much about my mindset and I'm working so hard. I'm not just letting the surgery do the work for me. I'm putting the habits in and changing my lifestyle, which is what I should have done the first time round.
Yeah. And so in hindsight, do you wish that you had the bypass to start off with, or do you wholeheartedly think that you sort of had to do this as a two-step process? Because if you had the bypass, you know, 3 years ago, your mindset would have still been the same as what it was 3 years ago. So do you think that a two-step process was what you physically needed, or?
Yeah, like you're probably right, Lita. Like it's sort of, you know, if I had the bypass the first time round, you know, I probably would have found ways around that because I wasn't psychologically in the right mindset to deal with the issues. But, so yeah, I don't have regrets. I've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah.
You know, I suppose it's like asking someone do they, you know, we all say, I wish I had the surgery earlier, but were we ready for it earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
That's it. Because like that, at the end of the day, everything, all the lessons you've learned are invaluable. Like they're so valuable to you moving forward, because I think you going through that is probably what's going to guarantee you success, because you can kind of identify things when they're happening and be more own your decisions more. Really bad words tonight.
There's a quote that keeps on popping up in my head the whole time that we've been chatting tonight. And it's, the tool only works as hard as what you will work for the tool. And I think your story and your little journey is like the best sort of replica of that, because the first time around, you know, you were kind of hoping that the tool was just going to do it all for you. And, you know, it did work, but then it stopped working because you weren't working for it. Second time around, you're working for the tool. Like, you're making sure that it's working for you. And it is this time around. So
yeah, I like that one. I just keep thinking my quote that keeps coming to my mind every time you're talking.
Habits.
No. Mine is, you only truly fail if you quit. So like that is the biggest thing. It's like you know, failure would be something that people would put out there when they're starting to regain, but you don't fail unless you quit. Like if you put your head in the sand and go, enough's enough, nah, I'm just giving up. Yeah, you failed. But if you go, hey, let's take a step back and understand why this weight's coming on and why I'm doing it. Did you really truly fail? All you really got out of it was a heap of lessons that are only going to make you stronger and more successful going forward. So, you know, that's the quote that keeps coming to my mind. Speaking of like people just starting out and different things like that, what would be someone just starting out, what would be your best piece of advice for them setting out on this process?
If they're starting out thinking about the surgery, I think they need to think about the reasons why they got to the sizes that they need to have the surgery. Yep. You know, it's not just because you've eaten too much food. There's a reason why we eat too much food, and it's getting to that. That would be my biggest advice is, and I honestly think it should be mandatory that you see a psychologist before you start this journey.
A lot of surgeons do have it as mandatory.
My mind.
Yeah. A lot of surgeons don't have it mandatory though, and I was listening to another podcast the other day where they were talking about how it was actually the BN one, and they were talking to Sally, your dietitian, and she said that how a lot of her clients that she has coming through are patients from other surgeons who don't have a psychologist as part of it, because obviously they don't have that team network. And I think that is probably more important than the actual surgery, is the team around it, like a psychologist, nutritionist. Like, yes, it costs extra, but what's your health worth?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, I've got to say, for me, like when last year with COVID, the telehealth appointments with the psychologist, they were gold, because even that, you know, being a mum with 2 kids and I was working full time, like just being able to go, okay, I've got a phone appointment with my psychologist, or, you know, I really need to talk to my psychologist about this. I'm going to see if I can book in with a phone appointment, you know, on my lunch break or whatever. Like, not have to go to travel
more
to one,
convenient.
just having it on hand like that was just, it was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
In terms of access to that service. And then I would talk to my sisters about it too, you know, and just sort of, you know, talk about how I was feeling. And it's funny, like, coming on this, I'm not a secret believer. Like, there are people who know I've had surgery, but I don't advertise it to people in probably fear of judgment.
Yeah.
But also, and it made me think, I'm going on this. Like, someone could see this, right?
Yeah.
Like, someone could see this and go, Hallie's had 2 surgeries? What? But if they're watching this and they, you know, then go, Allie's had 2 surgeries, she's been through all this, I'm watching this because I probably need help. Yeah. I want people to reach out for me and help. Like, you know, but there's just unfortunately people who do think, and I've heard people talk about it that don't know I've had the surgery, that go, you know, weight loss surgery. I know such and such that's had it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the, you know, you guys would hear it all the time. It's the top out, or it's not. It's hard work. And, you know, I still have to exercise each day. And I'm living proof of that the surgery doesn't just automatically work. Because the first time around it didn't automatically work unless you put that hard work in as well.
Yeah. It's a great tool, but, you know, it doesn't do all the work. It's not a magic wand. It's definitely not a magic wand. Yeah,
that is right.
Well, you've been an absolute wealth of information, Ali. We really do appreciate you coming on, and I guarantee you, the Bari Banter community, you shouldn't have any trolls because we're actually a great bunch of people. So I'm sure they'll reach out with gratitude and kindness
and lots of questions. I think
lots of questions.
I think this might open up a bit of a can of worms for people who are feeling a little bit you know, stuck in the whole gaining weight, but didn't know how to talk about it or who to talk to about it. And, you know, if people want to reach out to you, where's the best place for them to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. On my Instagram is probably the best place. So, you know, Ali version 2.0.
We'll tag you in everything so that people know how to spell it all properly and that.
But that's my best advice, is don't just sit there thinking, I failed at this. Like, reach out. And, you know, there are people to talk to. Yeah. You haven't failed if you reach out, as Shan said.
Yeah. And I'd love if other people who are like who've exited from the Instagram world because they have regained are listening to this podcast, you know, because I'm sure there's a few people out there that maybe are listening to it, maybe trying to get their feet back on the ground and get the ball moving again. And you do want to come on Bari Banter and open up about it like Ali has. I think we would love to have more guests like that to kind of give us an array of, you know, people that have struggled more than others, because at the end of the day, 50% of people within the community do regain. Fact.
We can even make you anonymous as well.
We can make you anonymous. We can not put your video up.
We don't need to put the video up. We don't have to say your name. Like, if you just want to come and talk about your story.
And give us information, because like the information you've given out is invaluable, and it will definitely help some people moving forward, and I guess make people more accountable to themselves. And that's what we started this podcast for, was literally to have people like you come on, give your story, talk about the information, and hopefully help someone else be successful and find that happiness within their process. So
as much as we love chatting to everybody who have had amazingly successful journeys, not everybody has a successful journey. So
different
it's really great.
forms of success, obviously. So like, obviously there's people out there who have had the perfect process, everything's gone smoothly, but that doesn't give a full array of what this process is all about for everyone. So yeah. Anyway, Ali, thank you so much for coming on.
Okay.
We really do appreciate
Fun
it.
chatting with you guys.
Thanks for putting up with my croaky
And
voice.
thank you for my dyslexic moments. Her croaky voice, my dyslexic moments. That is another episode of Barry Banter. Yes, that is another episode of Barry Banter in the books. We hope you got a little something from that one.
Head on over to Facebook or Instagram and check us out, or go to baribanter.com where you can watch past episodes, give us feedback, and let us know who you want to hear from next.
We love you all, and as always, please stay beautiful.